TV10 gaba mazima merere.
Can PDF challenge President Museveni? Stop dreaming. Othweri.
Tukuletera obwenkanya mu nsi y'abakulu pya.
Yagamba bannange tetwadda mu mulaba taata sijja kulimba. Ne mutunulira munabira mune ngamba nze nakutunze.
Manya amawulire okwetooloola ensi mu Africa Special.
They want to be described as honorable even when they are horrible. These are the men that we have.
Ebyobufuzi mu The Crossroads.
This is our party. Our party. Omanyi abafudde mu Uganda olw'ekibiina kino obamanyi?
Ne deep analysis ku bigenda maaso mu ggwanga mu The Deep Mind of the Deep State. N'agafa embuga mu Namulondo eyuuga.
Ye Katikkiro wekka asoose nga si Muganda okubeera Katikkiro.
Buganda gye bali mu kuyisaamu olugalo nga bwe mbu egenda ku ntikko nga tebatubuliranga na kifo mweri tira tuvuganya nani ali waggulu ffe tujje tumugjeyo bategeere nti Buganda gye babba eriko bannannyini baayo.
Tambulira mu nsi y'okumanya ng'oli ku TV10 Gano Mazima tusange ku TikTok, Facebook, X, YouTube kwasana ku kibanja kyaffe ekya www.tv10ganomazima.news. The Crossroads oba kiyite mu masaŋŋanzira. Oba oliawo embeera gye tutunuuliramu ebigenda maaso mu ggwanga twandibanga tutubidde mu masaŋŋanzira. Be bakulembera ssaako n'abo bakulembera buli omu tamanyi kiddako. Gavumenti nnyingi ze tuzze tulaba nga zivuunikibwa. Kyokka n'ababadidde mu bigere beewera okulaba nti tebagenda kukola nga bali abavuddewo bwe babadde. Wabula mu kaseera mpaawo kaaga ogenda okulaba nga bali musengavuddemu ngazzeemu ng'addiŋŋana amawolu. The Crossroads oba kiyite mu masaŋŋanzira wano ku TV10 Gano Mazima.
Engineer Kenneth Kaijuka, it's a pleasure to be in your presence this evening. And my name is Nala Salanjoli Senoga.
Senoga, nice meeting you.
Pleasure is all mine. It's an honor to speak to an engineer. Not yet had the chance. It's going to be my very first
time.
Yes. I've spoken to botanists, chemical engineers, never an engineer. Structure engineer, no.
Never.
Not yet.
So it's a pleasure also meeting. It's the first time I'm meeting you.
Yes, it is.
And I hope we have a very good interaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to get right into it. National Housing Corporation. Is National Housing a government institutional company or is it a private owned company?
Yes, first of all, to our viewers and listeners, but to you, Senoga and the team, you're welcome to National Housing and Construction Company Limited. That's our name, but we are National Housing and Construction Company Limited. Within the name, we have the housing mandate, but we also have the construction mandate. So that's why you get the name clearly prescribed National Housing and Construction Company Limited. Yes, Engineer Kijuka Kenneth is my name, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer. It's a pleasure receiving you at National Housing. We run by many acronyms, National Housing as the brand name, National Housing and Construction Corporation, because we are the only corporation of government. But in real trading as a name is, as I have highlighted it. National Housing is a business arm of government in real estate and construction. And it is the oldest construction company, I guess, after independence. If you look at many companies, whether private or public, that have existed, that have been sustainable since independence, National Housing is one of them. We were incorporated in 1964 as a public corporation. At the time, largely building houses for public servants. Over the years, with the changing regimes, interest change, and as you quite know, we moved from National Housing Corporation to National Housing and Construction Corporation, now to National Housing and Construction Company Limited. When you get the aspect of the limited, it means that it introduces the business side of things and it introduces shareholders. Yes, and this, the limited aspect came under the PAD Act, the Public Enterprise Reform Divestiture Act, I think of 2001, when the government said, we are not good, public entities are not good at doing business, let's let business be done by the private sector. And in many instances, you'll hear government talk of a private sector-led economy. So it moved from being public sector-led to private sector-led. And at that point, many institutions of government were divested. You'd have a bank like Housing Finance Bank, which used to rally funding for housing, move into the various tier levels of banking. You have institutions like, there was a cooperative bank, it was divested. The Ghana Commercial Bank, that is in the banking side of things. But in the companies like ours, then you got national housing to be divested as the business arm. So we are able to do public work and also do private work. We are a business arm, so our books of accounts are audited by the Auditor General, being the public entity, but then also we must present our profit and loss accounts. And every time they want to see that we are making profits, we are a going concern and we are sustainable.
So, with the diversification, who are the shareholders within the company?
Yes, principally, National Housing has two shareholders, and both of them are government entities. The first government is Government of Uganda with 51% shares, it's the majority shareholding. The other shareholder was the Libyan shareholder, the government of Libya. But ever since the late Muammar Gaddafi died, and Libya ran into political, instability, since that time, government recalled all the shares, and so we are running with a single shareholder called Government of Uganda. So I'm proudly happy to say that we are government owned, and that's how we are audited by the Auditor General. We report our accounts to government, but we run as a private business because we don't draw funds from the consolidated fund.
So, since the government is currently the main shareholder, are there finances that come from government to help the company run?
In principle, when you are a limited liability company, your sources of funding will come from your shareholders. And the mainstream source of funding would be capitalization. The shareholders will capitalize the entity looking at the business trajectory. In this case, yes, the shareholders capitalized us at the start through the assets. But I must say that over years, we've not seen major capitalization coming to the company as in physical money to drive the business. So what we've been able to do over years, how we finance our businesses, is we go to the commercial banks, borrow, develop, we'll do business, and pay back. And that's how the situation still is. We are looking to engage with government more to see if they can purpose to recapitalize us to meet the needs of housing as well as of construction.
Because it is duly needed, especially with civil servants. I don't think that there's many civil servants that actually have.
Now, actually, what we need to be looking at, it's not even capitalization per se, because the computation is for realizing capitalization. One would be premised on your portfolio that you hold. If today we are, say, a 1 trillion worth company, I don't think the shareholders will bring another 1 trillion. But in terms of the business trajectory, the outlook of the business volume we ought to be handling as a national player, then what we need is financing for the business volume that is at hand. If you look at the housing deficit per se, and you say national housing, you're going to champion this cause, then the capitalization trajectory can only finance 1 or 2 or 3 projects, even if you got 500 billion. Because the requirement to finance housing that is going to be adequate, that is going to be affordable, that is going to be sustainable, that is of the quality that is desired, is in the ranges of 5 to 10 trillion shillings. And that needs to be happening almost on an annual basis. So you can't see that money come through capitalization, because capitalization becomes like a one-off to lift your capital base, but then it can only run as far.
Okay. Leaving the capitalization side of things, I wanted to know, plus the viewer out there, what are the projects that National Housing has on its plate at the moment, and what are the projects that they have done for the past 10 years, notable projects that...
I think it is important for our viewers and Ugandans to know that from time of creation, National Housing has had its footprint literally in every part, in every city, municipality of this country. We proudly say, if you find any organized location in this country, if you start with Kampala City and you say Kororo, Nakasero, you talk of Bugorobi, both the apartments and the Middle East, those sweet, nice bungalows with road networks. Cross over to Ntinda, the entire Ntinda Minister's Village. We built it from a bush to the status and gave it that outlook. Cross over to Naria. If you look at Naria, we put up over 1,000 units, which now are transitioning from the little sustainable little houses into now high-rise. You cross over to Kiwatli, you'll find Sunset Apartments, about 300 units, over 15 acres of land, decent accommodation, space, road, National Housing. Proceed, go to Lubowa. Lubowa were the very first ones. You'll find there Regina Estate. You'll also find there Lubowa 108. As a matter of fact, the land where NSSF has built the Sorana Estates is land that was given by National Housing. We still have land that overlooks the Rweza Training and Conference Center. That's just for, and look at Makerere Flats, look at Uganda Road Flats, look at Kororo Flats, look at Kira, white and brown flats. All these are nodes that were residential nodes. That one created order, created a class, a state of living. So you understood that in a property that has been built to standards, to quality, and you can imagine some of them have lived 50 years to date. That is in the residential domain within Kampala. When you go out to the other cities, whether Mbarara, wherever you see a golf course, and you look at all that prime housing, all that land was set up because when we build, we create a lively housing establishment. We desire to see people live in decent houses, but also do recreation. So we used to have clubhouses. If you go, for instance, to Chambo Golowa Estate, you'll find the entire Lower Estate and the clubhouse. You go to, Makerere and elsewhere. So wherever you find these, recreational facilities in a housing establishment, which is a residential establishment, most likely, and I can bet, it will be the handwork of National, in all the cities, Guru, Mbale, Mbarara, Kotido, Koboko, were out there. And that was still in the framework when we were a corporation. And it had come under the framework of doing largely social housing for public servants. When you look at, for instance, the commercial housing, because housing has 4 classifications, major. One is the residential, which we've talked about. People sleep, and you want to ask when they sleep, then what do they do? So there's commercial housing. I'm happy to say this building where you are, Crescent Towers building, Crescent Towers is our property as National Housing. This year, celebrating 50 years. Built 50 years ago, still as competitive in terms of aesthetics, in terms of performance, in terms of functionality. Industrial housing, warehousing. If you go to 7th Street and Nari and elsewhere, you'll find our warehousing. Because we believe we do a holistic approach to housing. And so you go to institutional housing, schools, hospitals, barracks, nothing stops us to do this. And we've done projects of that nature throughout the country in many places. And so that's the kind of framework of housing under the housing mandate. There are projects we've done under the construction mandate.
Yes.
Nakasongora airstrip, Wakiso administration block. Actually, the first works of the Entebbe airport and later subsequent over years, there are works that National Housing was able to do, and many others all over the country. So we've prayed in both mandates, and we're happy to have done that. To date, if you want to know which projects we have, again, we pitch in both frameworks, the residential housing, but also in the commercial space. Yes, if you go to Naria, you'll find Jasmine apartments. These are 60 units, they are complete now, and almost sales are getting completed. You'll find Naria Pride. We have a set of initial about 100 units. The phase one, which is ongoing, and then but the total establishment is going to be about 500 units. Those are residential units. If you go to Namungona here, we have an estate which has 200 units. If you go to Mbarara, we set out 200 units. The first set of 100 is complete and occupied. The second set of 100 is at roofing stage. And many areas where we have designed some projects at financing level, some projects at documentation level. So we keep growing and doing as much as we can.
Financing the level of projects. How much does it cost? Rough figure, rough estimate for a project like Namungona housing to be realized.
Now, maybe I should give a little bit of a broader base in terms of considerations for housing. Having known the various categories of housing, housing is the biggest, globally, is the biggest infrastructure that runs economies.
Yes.
If you had the credit crunch of the US, it was the housing sector, 2008.
Yes.
Every country, every 10 years or 5, depending on the cycle, they will do what they call a population and housing census. As media people, you need to interest yourself. Is this just a name they baptized this exercise? What are the considerations behind it? One, every country must know its population. And the population, we're talking about people, not cows, not goats, not trees. All those others, you can do them. But you must know the people, because people impact on the environment, impact on every process.
Yes.
The second one, which the world determined as critical, economically, socially, or otherwise, is housing. Now, the moment you position a project like Crescent Towers, I just also want to give you a bit of an analogy. Crescent Towers is about 15,000 square meters of floor space. At an average of 3 square meters per person, officer like me seated behind desk, you're talking about 5,000, 6,000 officers. But you also know now people use workstations, so they condense more. So you have about 8,000 officers daily working here. If each officer got 5 customers a day, bare minimum, you're talking of 8 times 5, you're talking about 40,000 people who trek this property every day. So the mere fact that you put this building here, you created and attracted that density of people. Now you begin to think of traffic management. Some of them need parking, they need to access and exit. I'm sure you must have experienced that.
Yes.
You're going to have waste generated, maybe water or cartridges, office waste, paper, but you'll not find it littered because then you're managing waste. You're going to be talking of power consumption. This building will be connected on power and with standby power that will run offices because people must make business. You must control water. All these people must ease. And also, and many other aspects, internet, So you realize that the moment you establish a building, you've attracted business around it.
Yes.
And that's why globally, they would say, determine housing. Once we created, for instance, if I give you an estate like Sunset Apartments, 300 units in Kiwatule. If you take an average of each house, residential unit of 3-bedroom accommodating, say about 7 people or 8 people. Averagely in Uganda, these are the densities. 300 times 8 people, you're talking about 2,400 people in a space of 15 acres. There's one gate, controlled and manned. You have 5 security guards day and night with guns. You have dogs that do surveillance. You can put 1 camera at the gate, it will monitor that community. You have a shopping facility that manages. Now, by designing that estate in that framework, you're managing over 2,400 people. I can bet some districts have that population. Some districts like Karangara, some smaller districts in this country, or maybe some bigger sub-counties. And you can imagine a sub-county sitting on so many square miles of land. But here you are having the same population on 15 acres of land. I'm trying to show you the relevancy, the synergies between housing and population, and how once you have housing well mapped, well structured, well developed, you manage numbers and you manage the ecosystem around the people. So when we begin to say, what is the cost of a house? Or what is the cost of delivering a project? There are so many considerations we've got to look at. And I'm not sure the public is aware about these aspects. So I'm happy you're here. Maybe through this discussion, they will get to know.
Because the main issue right now, we have, I'm choosing to be on the side of citizens.
Yep.
Normal day people. Is how is it so that it's very expensive for us to actually, for a normal day ordinary Ugandan, for us to buy or to afford that house, Sunset Apartments, number one now. I mean, we're talking about figures exceeding 200 million, 300 and onwards. And how does this come about? How is this figure arrived at? Because normal day, if I'm actually building or constructing my own house, in my own way, not in
not in the national housing way or a professional way.
Professional, engineeredly prepared way, it's going to cost me up north of probably 90 million or 60 million. Depends on even on the house that I'm building. I can just put up one for 10 million. Question is, why are these units expensive? Why are they not affordable for the ordinary Ugandans? And when you're doing construction, do you think about the ordinary Ugandan?
I think the question of housing and affordability must be looked at from the supply and demand sides. If I look at the supply side, literally we said housing is private sector led, and it is going to be dictated by the capacity and the mass of the private sector has. So in our case, Uganda's case, who is the private sector? If we don't cross boundaries of Uganda to get people to come and build here, you'd want to say how many people have the muscle, the financing, the capacity, the ability to build for these Ugandans. Now, come on the demand side. Who is the customer that is willing to buy? And that's the question you're raising. But I want you to take you a little bit back into our population dynamics in arriving at whom do we capture as a customer. Because indeed you are right to say majority of us seem not to afford properties on the market. It is true. Why? First, assess the customer. The census that was done last year, 2024, if you look at the demographics, it will tell you that 78% of Ugandans are below 35 years of age. Yes. If you analyze this customer, 0 to 35, these are youth. How much purchasing power do they have? Many of them in primary school, many of them in secondary school, but even when you look at those who finish university at about 26 years of age, yourself and others, at 28, you're looking for a master's. At about 30, you want an additional, qualification, SCCA, CPA, you want to do administrative law to be competitive in the work environment. Now, what happens at about age 30, there's pressure for family. These are realities. Now, a boy who has left Makerere University has masters, the family is asking, beyond 30, don't you think you didn't find friends? And if it is a girl, it is worse. Yes. This girl will be told you are getting out of the bracket. Remember, maybe you have an additional 10 years to run into menopause. Maybe the pressure is correct. These two, before they even get purchasing power, they get into another cycle of production of Ugandans. And at about age 35, when they have produced 2-3 children, then now they have settled. They begin to think, where do we manage these children? Now they want a house. Remember, at 30, you are still schooling, and now you begin, or if you got a job at about 28, over the 6-7 years, that's when your ability, maybe your salary has grown, or you've been promoted, and therefore you begin to think, I can now have a house where to manage the family, and that's when we begin to see demand for purchase. Now remember, beyond, now the whole of this population is 78%, about 35 million Ugandans. So when there is an outcry, we can't afford, they actually cannot afford. Even if you put that house at 50 million shillings, they are all youth, they are still being nursed by their parents, they don't have, and that's why the noise is bigger. Therefore, Uganda, we need to find a different model of financing this need, this population. Beyond 35 to about 60 years is where you see ability to buy, purchase. Because Uganda, we think we should acquire and hold. But above 65, then you have people in retirement. They are interested in purchasing. So literally the margin that remains with the capacity to purchase is very small, about 10%. And that's why you'll see all developers who come on the market, they will load these assets on the market. But then ultimately, it's inevitable that if you have put 100 units, you will first sell like the first 10 or 20, the rest of the 80 will stay for about 5-6 years. And that's one side of the equation. Who is supposed to be buying? What is the capacity to buy? But the second part of it is the cost of construction. And I would have related this with the deficit when people talk about the deficit. The cost of construction has very many parameters. You're talking about if you are building for yourself. I have a chart which I would be happy to share later, maybe for your use. To build, you must have land. There's no building that doesn't stand on land. And you'll find that the cost of land, averagely, in high-end areas, it may be extremely high. In other areas, it may be relatively cheap. But you'll find that land, the cost of land will constitute about 10% in the price of the house. Beyond land, you have the preliminary activities of design, of approvals, local authority, KCCA, NEMA, and others. Those could also run for about 10%. Beyond there, you have financing cost. Before you build, you must have financed. Now, financing costs from the banks to date ranges between 18% to 25%. But even if you average it at about, say, 15%, it's a cost. Beyond financing, there is actual construction. Now, the cement, the bricks, the bars, and the standards of the house. Beyond that one, you're talking about infrastructure. Now, for you may look at a house being affordable when you do it because the neighbor has already brought the road. Maybe a pole for power is closer to you and you can only, it's a one-pole service. But when we are setting up an estate, which is exclusive on a 100-acre piece of land, you have all the way to pull these services. So water, power become cost. But you also want to know that, for instance, Kampala and all our cities, we are on pit latrines, we are on septic tanks. The sewer system coverage is less than 20%, being undertaken by National Water as a sole provider. So at the end of the day, if you are going to look at, for us, setting up lagoons in the valley and drain, acquire land for lagoons and make sure they are connected so that you can safely flush your house. All these become infrastructure costs to this house. Remember, if I'm in business, I have a marketing cost. I have to advertise these units and later sell and make a margin. Now, when you look at these components of cost, what the ordinary person looks at when they do this job by themselves is that they have had these sections disaggregated. They spread them over, say, 10 years. You're building your house for a period of 10 years. You don't remember when you bought land or it was given by your father. You wait for a neighbor to bring water, you tap close. So you have dispensed or expensed cost. But the actual cost, like of 4 walls, if you are doing a house with a roof, forgetting all these external costs, is about 35%. Now, in other words, if a house is 100 million, The actual cost which you think is affordable when you do it by yourself is the 35 million. But when you put infrastructure, 15 million, you put taxes, 18 million, you put power, 10 million, ultimately the house of 100 million, you find that the cost you need is like 35. So the public would be demanding, when I do it myself, it looks cheap. That is one part of the cost structure. But also the aspects of specifications. What quality of the house are you building? Because we ought to have standards that should clearly dictate the construction. And when you look at the specifications and the quality of the house, is another scenario that if we had statistics from UBOS after the census, they would have been telling us whether the houses we have are substandard or they are medium or high quality. Now, depending, if you're doing a high quality house, the price will require significantly go up because the specifications will also be up. So literally, these are the aspects that determine affordability, that determine, and because construction became private sector led and land belongs to the people, these two parameters have also further created trouble for housing.
I have 10 minutes to finish, but I have two things. One is about design, specifications. Design for these houses, it's an ongoing trend. It's actually growing and it's becoming louder. There's people that are out. Is a loud outcry about design, especially for kitchens and bathrooms. It's the same thing. It's the what you find in housing units in this estate. It's the same thing. Housing units in the other estate. There's no difference in design. There's no variety of design. It's majorly the same thing. Just a kitchen top, and that's a kitchen.
Yes, you're right, Senoga. In principle, human beings walk vertical, sleep horizontal. It's a basic engineering principle. If you want to sleep vertical and walk horizontal, it's another dynamic.
Yeah.
Whether you want to do matrices of designs, the core principles will remain. Take, for instance, when we're here. When we duplicate these floors, we are creating more land because every floor is land. You don't know there are people below me, neither are you aware there are people above us.
Yeah.
Now, that's just, you can't do otherwise. You'll have to load these floors going vertical. In terms of design, if you look at developed economies, go to UK, you'll see houses literally typical design. That's how you control cost. Because the moment designs are typical, then you know what the cost of doors are, you know what the cost and the standard size houses. You go to Paris, you'll think it was one architect who designed the entire city. Now, Ugandans, we have a level of madness, which we need to drop. You know, permutations and combinations, how you can vary your house not look like a neighbor's house, also have limits.
Yeah.
And this madness creates cost. Actually, Ugandans were believed to be more outlook, we look outside than inside. Again, you go to UK, houses.
That person would say you.
So if it is beauty, then you pay for it. But also, like I've said, there are so many. Look at all the vertical houses that are coming up. They will all be literally boxes. However much you change it, you can make it, if you do it diagonal, horizontal, rectangle, the more you do that, the more pockets of space that are unusable in a house. So the moment you have it square or rectangular, the bed will run like that, the table will run like this, and you have more usable space. But do it circular. Either you need circular beds, you need circular tables, you need circular systems. It wouldn't work. So that's why you'll find bathrooms, rooms, kitchens. There are not many options. You can decorate externally, but internally, not as much.
Okay. My final question is there a way in which citizens can actually collaborate or partner with National Housing on particular projects? Say, in essence, I could have my money and I want National Housing to do the construction. Is that possible? And Where do they go? Who do they see? And how does it work?
I needed to raise the issue of the deficit. I talked about specifications and quality of housing. Even when we talk about the deficit of 2.4 million housing units, this is calculated from a perspective that a room should have 4 people, or say 2 people in a room, but they are sleeping 8 or 6, most of the scenarios in the cities. And therefore, you realize that if you had more houses, you would accommodate these guys. But the National Housing Policy classifies houses that if a house is built to specifications of 50 years and above, it's a permanent house. If it is 25 years and below, it's a temporary, it's a semi-permanent house. 15 years and below, and what do we mean? Grass thatched houses, for instance. These tents, all these things that you see in the city, they are all below, they can't live 15 years and above. Now, the deficit is calculated from a standard. There must be a benchmark. If Uganda would desire, the way we talk about middle income status, how should we see middle income status with respect to housing? If we desire to have permanent houses of quality, of size, of spec that can live 50 years and above, and we do that as a benchmark, the deficit is about 7 million housing units. If you lower the spec to say whoever is in a semi-permanent house, that is housing available, then your deficit lowers to about 5 million housing units. If you lower the standard to the temporary houses, that is whoever sleeps in a container or in a tent or in a shack, after all they are provided, then the deficit goes to about 2.4 million housing units. Now you're talking about how can people collaborate. I'm trying to show you that the deficit is so huge that we need everybody to collaborate in bridging that gap. One, we've seen that much of our population has inability to buy, but they have ability to rent. You must attract partners who are going to bring in money that is going to be collected over a long period of time, because the rent goes slow in return. Now, you've got to collaborate with the landowners. And I will tell you, if you go to all these cities and you see where slums are seated, these lands belong to the kingdoms, largely, big chunks of land where there are slums. They belong to faith-based organizations, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church. Look at all of them. Now, National Housing is partnering with these major landlords to offset the cost we talked about, the cost of land, to show that somebody already has land and we can partner with him and we look at how we profit together going forward. We also are desiring to collaborate with material manufacturers and providers to show you that indeed housing drives the economy. If you did your research as reporters, as journalists, and documented the industries we have in this country, I bet you'll find that more than 60% of them are producing for housing. Yes. Not even agro-processing, not in pharmaceuticals, not in wood, but they are all producing cement, tiles, floor, all these things. So partnering with those who are manufacturing, who have already invested the manufacture of products, to get on table and say, look, you already have the products on shelf. You don't have to wait to first sell them to me, and then I put up a house. Bring your materials. X brings the land. I bring my expertise and my brand in the market, and we put up an estate. Once this estate is up and running, when the sales happen, including financiers, the banks, they need to stop from purely commercial lending and become partners in the development. Yes. So a bank like Housing Finance Bank brings 100 billion shillings, and when we put up the estate, we will have common focus to serve the Ugandans and get this working. So that's how we can collaborate with the market, and we think it's a model that we are championing that is apparently starting to work. And so many people are working to us as National Housing to say, look, I have this, how can we partner? And even you in the media, you have a role to play, the marketing of these facilities. Yes. You don't have to come with a bill up front. Let's make a sale market so that we know that each of our contribution has returned value, and then we can pay ourselves, yes.
So who are they? Like individuals? There's individuals that have land. So individuals that do have the land and they are willing to partner, who do they see, or who are they supposed to get in touch with?
Yeah, of course, National Housing, we're a brand. We are happy this year. We are celebrating 60 years of sustainable growth and development. We are not a company that you'll think will fade tomorrow. And those are the risks that people fear. There are two aspects of fear, even from the bank side. That look, we've given you money for long term. If it is going to return in 15, 20 years, will you still be available? Will you still be answerable? So individuals also normally ask those questions. They come here. And if we visit their lands, they make applications, they advise they have land, we do due diligence on the land, and if we find it is as appealing in terms of partnership, not all land is good for the business, but should we find, say, Noga, your land is as good, then we agree, we get on table, and we design it, we show you the dollar signs on how soon the returns will come, but we'll have agreed, we'll value the land, and know that you've come with this kind of value into the equation. Yeah. And we move forward. We sign MOUs, we sign agreements. That is one part. But there's also where people sell us land. Outright sell, those who want to divest their risk early. They don't have the time to be in the business equation for a long time, and so they sell the land to us. So that's how we can partner. And I think it is healthy. The models are many. Like I mentioned, banks will have their terms, producers of materials will have their terms. Equally, people like you in the media, you may have your terms. Yes.
So, National Housing is celebrating 60 years in the business. Quite a number of achievements. Going back to what you said earlier, the establishments that you mentioned and all of the things that you talked about, what do you see as the future of Uganda in real estate from a national housing point of view?
Yes, the moment we scale down from doing, first of all, mass housing from a public perspective, and we started doing it as a business, I think the market lost leadership. The market used to look to national housing, first of all, for standards, for quality. If you visit any of our estates, amazingly, you'll find even when we paint color cream, many neighbors will paint cream because they have a feeling that is the trending color for the season. The time we did the French roofs, if you go to Bukoto above Total, as you go to the church in Tinda St. Luke, and you look at, people adopted the time of the French roof houses, the same we did in Lubowa. So we saw the market copy. So you'd be the market leader in setting standards, in setting design, but also in setting pricing. Our desire is that this must be reestablished, because the thinking was that the market can do it. We've seen the market cannot do it. Each of the individuals cannot go into the depth of research, cannot attract technology that is needed to create massive housing. And many times, if we, for instance, model the prefab technology, prefab is where you have units prefabricated, and then you assemble unit, floor, walls, and slab, like we did in Bugolovi flats. Then people would adopt, because now it has lived a period. So people do not have risk capital that they can sink. They don't have that muscle. So our desire is that national housing can be repositioned and repurposed to do that leadership. The time we've been out of that role, a lot has gone amiss. The second one is that we must look at land as an inelastic resource. Land doesn't grow big, and as people sprawl horizontally, you see Kampala City connecting from Mpigi almost to Mukono. All these houses can be condensed, like I've given you the Chiwatle model, can be condensed. Maybe Nakawa division alone could accommodate the entire population of Kampala. And what would you see? You would see green, vegetable, environment that gives you fresh air. You would see land that is available for agricultural production. You would see less power connectivity running everywhere. You would see less road work, because we'll have reorganized housing. And our desire over the next journey of 60 years is to engage with the government that we must repurpose and recenter housing at the planning stage, at financing stage, and ultimately to see that we provide for Ugandans. The the financing framework which runs in other sectors. Government will, for instance, borrow 100% for road infrastructure. The acquisition of the right of way. In other words, when they buy land from the owners to get a road going, they have acquired land. In housing, it's not happening. We want to see bulk acquisition of land reserved for housing development. Power, even before you go to power, when you look at things like financing of the road infrastructure, these funds are borrowed from multilateral lenders at concessional financing in the margins of 2 to 3%. But we've not seen this borrowing done for housing. Our desire is the next journey of 60 years, government pitches housing in the same framework. It borrows for roads, it borrows for water, it borrows for power. After all, these roads will be connecting houses, power will be looking for houses, water will be looking for houses. So if we got into the bracket of government financing, then the pricing, the cost of finance will have come down. Once the cost of finance comes down, the cost of the house will come down. And therefore, the prospective buyer client will see the product as being affordable. And it's no brainer. If every year you give 10 trillion to road infrastructure, give 1 trillion to the housing infrastructure, and we champion. You also want to know how much employment housing creates. Housing creates employment more than any other.
Everywhere, in every economy.
I think housing is followed by agriculture.
Yes.
And if you financed housing with even a 1 trillion per year, that employment would come. But also the return is in terms of GDP. It has a high return, 12 to 15%. But also in terms of the value chain and supply chain. I will tell you, friends, housing has the longest supply chain. People, it impacts from start to end. You remember we're talking about a land supplier, you're talking the person who makes bricks, you're talking about... Now, in the professional side, the chain is bigger. Engineers, architects, surveyors. Now, these are land surveyors, they are quantity surveyors, the electricians, electromechanicals, the chain, and at all stages. But also if you come to the supply side, including somebody who supplies food at site, yes, the truck driver, and the fuel consumption running to ferry materials, all the material supplies, like I said, you look at a building like this. You're looking just right in this room. Yeah. You're looking at, yes, bricks that made the walls, you have steel that frames, you have glass, you have electrical, electromechanical. So, and ultimately, when these 4 walls are built, that's not the house. When we set up buildings, buildings are set to function. Now, what is it that you need in the house to function? The entire furniture in these buildings, tables like this, beds, fridges, TVs, all these ultimately are controlled in an environment called a house. And that's how the economic value of a house, once you set it up, you really can return. When you look at the quality of the house, you equally know the quality of the furniture that goes with the house. And then the economy will come up. So, yes.
Before you get out of that, is it because that there are so many substandard competitors? For example, those land dealers who call them realtors, they have bumped into and intoxicated the environment that even government reach a point of even fear to invest in their money. Because if you look for everywhere, you go out of Kampala, the suburbs, the people who are saying that they are selling land or what they are doing is decongesting the city or even those cities to the extent that no one even thinking that, according to what we have explained, that there is future for Uganda's development or housing finance, housing estate.
I think there are basic underlying challenges that must be resolved, in my view, as the CEO of National Housing, as somebody at the center of housing development. One, the land and the land tenure systems dictate the development. The aspect of freehold ownership by Ugandans, people have land, they have no capacity to develop it. They have land, they have no capacity to negotiate infrastructure development. They have land, they don't have ability to finance development of that land. And they even are not thinking, each one is thinking at family level, the land they have on how they can optimally utilize it. This must be demystified. Countries that have developed will not let land run in the hands of the people. It may sound weird. It is going to be a hard nut to crack for Ugandans, but it's a plain fact that you have somebody seated on Kampala Road. He has his 1 acre, but this gentleman at Kampala Road he doesn't have a 10,000 shilling, because land it's not disposable income. Yes. It's not like when you have a cow and you milk it and you sell milk, you keep getting that 1,000 shillings. Land, until either you dispose it or you put it development, that it will return to you as the owner. So the aspect of land ownership, and Ugandans remain poor when they hold big chunks of land, must be demystified, especially in urban establishment where you have numbers. The second one is certainly the ability now to engage the planning. When land belongs to individuals, the planning is at household level. What happens at a family level? You have your 50 by 100. Overnight, husband and wife are saying, what do we do with our land? They engage an engineer like me or an architect like you, and you scribble the house they think they want. They've already started investing. Remember, when they acquired the land, they were not guided. They didn't know how the development dynamics of the area are going to be. Yeah. There are no zoning plans for these developments. There are no limitations on how high or how low you can go. So literally, the individuals plan their little bungalow. As they go to the local authorities for approval, local authorities need money, they will clear it. And before you know, you have haphazard developments happening because the planning is at household level. How we need to broaden this planning and create dictates. Even if land belongs to you, this is what cities have done. I mean, they will say the entire area of Bugorobi, you can't do less than 4 levels. And those create security, create connectivity, create ability to meet the meeting of minds, because you are like e-commerce and you have same challenges. So land, planning, approvals, local authorities must belt up to say certain developments, we can't accept them.
That was going to be my next question. Yes. Is national housing available or present at KCCA level, urban planning, and that wing, the technical wing of KCCA that gets to give someone permission to actually construct or put up an establishment or infrastructure within the city? Is national housing, since it's actually government, a government institution, do you have people present there to actually give guidance? And
no, you see, in the structure, in the entire structure of government, once national housing was divested as a business, and because I'm not financed to do public work, it's annoying for people to probably, hear this. But when the Auditor General is auditing me, he's looking at how much capital I've raised and how much development I've done with the capital. Even when I raise capital through borrowing, if I fail to pay those loans, then of course there is a huge slap in my face. So when do I think of sitting with Wakiso, sit with Ginger, sit with Koboko, sit with Kasese to do their planning? I know the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, ought to have a structure that goes all the way up to the bottom, up to parish level. If we are talking about, for instance, PDM, there should be a component of housing. You remember we've talked about how housing is the economy, how housing redeems everybody. So there are no structures that come right from the top all the way up to the grassroots. And remember, housing is not only happening in the urban establishment. We're also talking about housing in the rural establishment. Yes. If you sit on a hill there, I sit on the next hill, and the government says we shall do rural electrification. Take 10 poles from your house to my house. The cost of the 10 poles may not be returned through a bill they pick at your house and a bill they pick at his house. In other words, there is sunk cost. Now, if you think planning to see how you bring communities together, later on to free land for agriculture, the cost centers become less. So the planning must be holistic, and that's where the government must have structures. I would be happy, yes, if national housing was to be financed to do that role, because there's nothing that stops us from doing it. As we speak, we are opening up 6 regional offices. We hope we shall come closer, but these are going to be established in the cities. One, we're going to have a regional office for the Eastern. It is going to be in Mbale. That office next month is running. We'll have an office for the Western, Mbarara. That one next month it will be running. We are establishing an office in the Greater Karamoja at Moroto. It will be running maybe in about 6 months. In the Northern, we're establishing an office in Gulu, but also in the Arbata in Graben, we'll establish an office at Hoima. We are trying to move out, but from a business perspective. You open an office, it doesn't work, you're not going to sustain it. You've seen banks like Standard Chartered, they had branches. If it doesn't make business sense, they close. But the population is growing, so there must be structures that are permanent. And we're engaging with the government that while we have the business side of things, we must move back to the corporation side of things so that we have the public component, which is financed through the public budget, the consolidated budget, so that you can sustain people who will give guidance to how people build and feature in the general planning of the areas. So we are happy to do that as long as we reposition and repurpose the business of the company.
So what should the Ugandan look out for ahead of projects that National Housing is taking up currently or in the next few years?
Yes, I want to invite Ugandans to engage with us. It's true that when you come to us, we are not selfish. When we do the business, we don't do it for ourselves. We do it for the good of the public. When we make profits, they go to the consolidated fund and they help to run other government business. So we are happy to meet with Ugandans. One, on professional aspects, we are fully established with the design hub where we have architects, we have engineers, we have quantity surveyors and surveyors. People can come, one, be guided on how they can develop, be guided on how we can partner. We have legal chambers because we've dealt in land and land matters. We have historical information. We know what goes on in the business of housing. So those even who are interested in going into that business, we'll guide them on what they expect and what they can experience going forward. But also we invite Ugandans to engage with us on the products that we have. We are innovative year in, year out to look at how we bring on board technology that can accommodate more. They also can come and buy our products or rent our products. Crescent Towers, as I've mentioned, we are happy. We are probably one of the biggest landlords in the city in terms of this one-stop center. If I'm the landlord for Stanbic Bank, the biggest bank, if I'm the landlord for the delegation of the European Union or the African Development Bank. So I think we can duplicate this. And if we did this Crescent Towers at a lower scale in each of the cities, I think we can impact more positively. Sure. So we invite Ugandans to visit us at Crescent Towers and our regional offices when they are up and running for interaction and many things.
Okay. A reminder when those offices are opening in every place. You talked about Mbale.
Mbale next month, by end of this month, Mbale and Mbarara should be up and running. Okay. Yes. Then when we start the financial year in July, we expect that we shall have the Hoima and the Gulu offices running. Okay. And we hope probably, if things go right, in the next financial year, we should be able to open up the Moroto office. Of course, we shall maintain the central office running, which is Kampala. Okay. Yeah.
Is there a relationship between National Housing and the NSSF fund?
Yes, the relationship we have is that first of all, our workers are contributors to the fund. That we can't divorce it. We contribute. But beyond contribution is that we seem to have similar business appetite in the market. So as the developers of the properties, certainly we meet at certain fronts and discuss these aspects. But probably you want to know whether there is a more direct, legal, established, structured relationship. I would want to say no, because NSSF is established by its different legal instruments, and we establish differently. However, maybe we meet at the Housing Finance Bank. The Housing Finance Bank, which I mentioned, traditionally was created to mobilize funding for housing development, because the dynamics keep changing. They can go and borrow long term, they know who has the money, and then for us, we get on the development costs. Now, that's what they were supposed to do. This is what we were supposed to do. Actually, some people confuse Housing Finance Bank and National Housing, but these are two institutions. One is a bank, one is a construction company. Now, at the Housing Finance Bank, the bank has 3 shareholders. Shareholder number 1 is Ministry of Finance. Shareholder number 2 is NSSF. Shareholder number 3 is National Housing. So as shareholders at Housing Finance Bank, I think we have a dotted relationship with the NSSF. Okay. Yes. Yeah, but a more robust relationship we need to have, which we are discussing. Yeah. We already have had many engagements. I've explained how long term. Let me give you a quick scenario. If you bought a house, a 3-bedroom house at 300 million in Kampala, informed by the cost centers, and you put it, even if it is owner occupier, if you occupy that house by yourself, what you put on the books is if you are renting it, or the money you save by occupying your own house, or the money you forego by occupying it yourself. Now, that house would attract 1 million shillings. Now, if you bought it at 300 million, for you to get back the 300 million, you need 300 months. Straight jacket computation. Yes. Now, 300 months, if a year has 12 months, 300 divided by 12, you get 25 years. Pension funds, social security funds. So if they come to this reality, of course they are doing some development, but we're also telling them, let's be your vehicle. Your mandate is to collect money, secure it, and divest it to businesses that return. So why go in construction? Let National Housing do the construction for you. These are the relationships we are discussing, and we hope they can bring us results in the long run.
It begets my question of, is it possible, or if it's actually happening, how does it come about, or how can it be implemented? A situation where if I can't pay 200 million upfront, is there a payment structure for an ordinary citizen to acquire that property and pay probably every month or every year for a number of years or a certain time?
It's the ball game that we need to use with the double lenses. Again, get out of the madness of ownership. I would tell Ugandans, it's not sufficient that you desire just simply to have a house. Actually, what you need probably is accommodation, or what you need is a space that will facilitate your business or your accommodation. When I talk about rent, I know Ugandans will not like it. But take, for instance, look at a property like Crescent Towers. 50 years. I think when I was born, it was being built. I didn't know I would be a CEO here then, but I don't think I'm going to be the last person who will sit here. And it still has another 50 years or 100 years to go. Now, housing is that long term. It transcends generations. Now, you as Senoga build a house at 200 million. Initially, it costs you. You don't have that money. You're making cries. But Senoga, 30 years later, you leave. Your family tree, or those who will buy it or acquire it, refurbish it, will continuously use it. So the time horizon of an infrastructure called housing needs to be brought on table when we are attracting financing or when you're buying. What is the primary use? It is you. What is going to be the secondary use of this property? And what is likely to be the tertiary use? And when will it be decommissioned? Houses in UK have lived 400 years, 500 years. Yes. If a generation is 100 years, so those are 5 generations. It means that the person who used it at generation 5 should have been factored in the equation at acquisition stage. So we try to buy too much for the future. And therefore you put up a house, you break the family. Even when you have labored this at roofing stage, you've borrowed this money, and the banks sell it for across it for peanut, and the family is shattered 100%. We need to see housing, people who invest in housing as a business, which probably National Housing would have been doing if we had the ability to attract that funding. And people find houses built, either rent or do short-term leasing. And when you want to move, you can move, switch from this property to another property. But as you move, there will be another customer who is happy to be in this property. I'll give you two models, scenarios. One is the Libyan model. When actually they acquired shares in National Housing, that was running. Libya said every Libyan, once you leave university, you're one. Go to 1-bedroom unit. When you get a girlfriend and you're married, go to 2-bedroom unit. If you produce 2 children, you shift to a 3-bedroom unit. When these children go, now the reverse becomes true. Now the children have gone. Remember, after graduation, they also get their 1-bedroom unit. Now the husband and wife stay together. But as soon as whether the husband dies or wife, you are one. You go back to 1-bedroom and you end out of the... But these houses would still be there. And the model was running. They had hoped this can be duplicated here. In other words, housing as a service, not as a sense of ownership, and it breaks your heart. The second model we would look at is the German model. German says you can never have 2 houses, you can never have 2 homes. And that has done wonders for their infrastructure development. Now, if you have a house in Kampala, or let's say you have a house in Kotido, and you work in Kampala, for them to license for you to have a house in Kampala and a house in Kotido is going not to be possible. Why? Because the second house will occupy space, will need all those services we've talked about, and ultimately it is also dead capital that you are stacking in that house. Now, they say, sleep in Kotido, work in Kampala. What did that mean? It transformed the transport sector. High-speed trains, because you must be here. Like now, after this interview, I get on the train station. In the next 30 minutes or 40, I'm in Kotido. Now, the next morning, I have a meeting at 8, at 7, and so all my investments will be in that one house, and you free space. And the capital would have put in another house in Kampala. Now becomes available for alternative businesses. So as a country, we need to pick models that are going to work for us. We cannot carry the pride and we sleep with the shame. Look, we can't afford, but we want big. Rwanda, our friends in Rwanda have moved. They have communes called Dugudu, something like that. Now, they've caused these communities, they will go and set up an estate of 1,000, chipanse, and they will come to this village and say, all of you are going to move. So the laxity that we provided to Ugandans to be decision makers in matters of development is what is killing us as a country. In development, there is no democracy. Development must be dictated. If it's a bridge, you must have confidence that this bridge I will cross. If you understood that this bridge is going to sink in as you cross, it becomes a disaster. So there are not many bargains, and as you can see, as houses sprawl, they eat the green. They eat the environment. Before you know, there's also a hype of red, black roofs. Basic science will tell you, Dean, that color attracts heat. Try it tomorrow when you're in the sun. Put on a black shirt, you'll sweat the whole day. Now, as these houses have black and red roofs, they pull the heat. You'll see ceilings crack. It's no brainer. You'll see people connect fans and air conditioning, which would not have been probably required. So we need to think deeply on this thing called housing and this infrastructure setup. The fewer the houses, if they are going vertical, which is the thing for the future, there's a less exposure to the sunlight. Now, the science, you're not an engineer. The exposure, because when you spread, the roofs are picking more. So I think we need to think more deeply, reorganize housing, center stage housing in planning, in financing, in settlements, and we should not allow everybody to build where they so wish. By so doing, we'll scale down infrastructure costs. You'll be amazed. UK and Uganda have the same land acreage. about 250 square kilometers. But the road network we have, and UK has double the population of Uganda. They're about 80, we're about 40 something. But the road network is half ours, and ours is more. Why? Because we're trying to reach every house. Everybody is scattered. But in that case, they have consolidated housing, and one road takes everybody there. So I think we need to do more, and either as training, as information, and then we plan, we zone, we set standards, and we'll get there.
My question still was, is there a way that a person can get property and they have a payment structure to get?
Yes, we, as National Housing, we have payment models. When we get a rich customer like Senoga, and he says the house is ready, you pay outright. We are happy to get that money. When we get a customer who says, my income, I have ability to pay 3-4 million, no, say 2 million per month. Some of them will find us when we are striking the ground. And if the estate is going to take us 2 years, by the 24 months, they have accumulated some substantial amount of money. But then when they want to enter the house when it is complete, we have a model called rent to own. Now the rent to own model is that when you reach 50% of the price of the house, at that point we recognize that we are two shareholders. Yes, the half is still belonging to National Housing, the half belongs to you. So now we allow you to enter the facility, and then we begin. When you add more money, your component of rent keeps going down. Because if a house, like we said, is 1 million shillings per month, so when we are 50-50, it means that if we collect this rent, 500 is to you, 500 is to us. So in other words, so we begin, when you increase and you become 80 owner, our ownership is 20, so your rent becomes 200,000, and before you know, you own a house. We also have, of course, I've said we have the rental properties. I would encourage people not to despise rent. In the estates we develop, when people start by renting there, we have seen dynamics, things that happen. First of all, they are good settlements. When we build, we create environments. It is far from just the walls, because you create a decent community that has access, that is connected to services. So people fall in love with the environment. Before you know, the family knows, oh, Dean stays in Sunset Apartments, and you don't want to leave because you don't want to change your address. You've been there 10 years. Before you know, you started on the payment and you acquire the facility. So there are many models that we, but of course all these are dictated by the financing. Some financiers will not let you put an estate on rent or rent to own because it will take longer to return. So then they say keep it on the sales trajectory. Sometimes you've got to look at alternative sources of funding to pay the loan, later on to roll this estate to such options of acquisition.
Okay. Yeah. Final message to Ugandans.
Yes, my final message to Ugandans is that, honestly, we need to look back and understand that if we are going to be 100 million in the next 25 years, and we continue building horizontally, we'll gain the houses which are permanent. It's not easy to move them. They kill this good soil permanently, and ultimately we shall have no food to eat. So we need to focus on coming to institutions like National Housing or other developers of scale to see how they can live in a community setting, where even government, you know, when you're in a community setting, you can engage and you demand certain rights and government will provide them. So I want to appeal to them to know that the time is up to trying to live independently on huge acreages. It's not sustainable with respect to environment, with respect to services, with respect to land, with respect to travel time, with respect to many things, waste management, and come to decent and planned organized housing provided by National Housing and other providers. But also, we need to know that land is inelastic. We need this land for our own survival. I want to invite them to collaborate with us on many avenues that are available with us. As a national provider, we are happy to engage at all levels. And hopefully, we'll redeem housing. But I also want to appeal to my shareholder government. Ultimately, government needs to put its foot down in terms of land tenure systems and then the usage, in terms of planning, because cities go ahead of planning. If you look at the suburbs, individuals are going, acquiring land and developing, and then government follows with road networks which cannot be straight, which the power supply becomes difficult, and the waste, either stormwater or sewage, become difficult to manage. We can cordon off boundaries and say beyond here, we first do the zoning and mapping and planning, and then we let the people to come and develop according to plans. So spatial planning is key, and this can only be done by government, not by individuals. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah.
TV10. Gano Mazima.